Pete Hegseth sat before Congress claiming accountability was back, then couldn't explain why he fired a single one of 8 generals, couldn't justify putting classified strike times into a civilian messaging app, and couldn't explain why 0 commercial ships have crossed the Red Sea since his successful Houthi operation that cost $1 billion in missiles. He smiled, pivoted, and evaded. The question the hearing left hanging: who exactly is Pete Hegseth accountable to?
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
it's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the
Okay, so everyone knows the Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah. What was the classification marking? Because
again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say anything.
That's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time...
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? You've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or clarification.
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
Is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm just asking if it applies to you.
Very successfully.
I'm not asking about the Houthis.
The previous administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
asking about
we actually put them in a place where they called for a ceasefire.
I reclaim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you?
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration.
The answer is zero.
military vessels transit.
No. I didn't ask
just
about
this
military
week.
vessels. I
Well, which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
How many
civilian and
commercial vessels?
transit,
It's been several
thankfully.
weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have
Well,
transited the
would
Red Sea?
you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr. Secretary,
ships?
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer
ships
is zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking
of a
you
leader
why.
that we
I
need
think you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want
Why
better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
This hearing is a masterclass in what congressional oversight is supposed to look like, and a devastating portrait of what happens when a cabinet official tries to hide behind vague language, patriotic pivots, and procedural deflections in a room full of people who understand exactly what they're doing. The congressman came in with a specific and lethal strategy. Don't ask broad questions, ask precise ones. Don't let the witness philosophize. Don't let him retreat into abstraction. And above all, don't let him change the subject without being called out. What the American people watched unfold was not a dramatic ambush born out of nowhere. It was the natural result of a Secretary of Defense who had spent months making bold public claims about accountability and military success, while quietly doing things that, when examined up close, told a completely different story. The Signal chat scandal, referred to during the hearing as the texting of F-18 launch times on an unclassified system, is the spine around which this entire confrontation is built. What happened, in the simplest possible terms, is this. Pete Hegseth used a commercial messaging application, Signal, to share operational military details, including the launch time of F-18 fighter jets heading into live combat over Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen. Those jets were flying into range of anti-aircraft missiles. The information about when they were taking off was exactly the kind of time-sensitive operational detail that, if intercepted by the enemy, could be used to prepare defenses, attempt a shoot-down, or warn Allied forces on the ground. The chat group in which this information was shared included a journalist, a civilian with no security clearance and no legal authorization to receive that information. This is not a gray area. This is not a matter of differing interpretations of national security law. Department of Defense regulations are explicit. Classified information must be marked with its classification level, it must be transmitted on classified systems, and it must not be shared with unauthorized personnel under any circumstances. The congressman walked Hegseth into this trap with surgical patience, asking first where the information came from, then how it was transmitted, then what its classification marking was. At each step, Hegseth gave an answer that, when combined with the previous answer, constructed the very case he was trying to avoid. He confirmed that everything communicated by the Secretary of Defense is classified by its nature. He refused to say the information was unclassified. He then insisted there was no classified information shared. These three positions cannot all be true simultaneously, and the congressman made sure every person watching understood that with absolute clarity. The accountability exchange is where this hearing reached its most pointed and arguably most important moment. Hegseth has made "accountability is back" one of his signature phrases, using it to signal a break from what the administration calls the soft, politically correct military culture of previous administrations. He fired generals, he restructured commands, he promised results. The congressman took that slogan and turned it directly back on its author. Does accountability apply to you? The question is not complicated. It does not require legal expertise or military experience to understand. It requires only that a public official apply to himself the same standard he claims to apply to others. Hegseth's response, that he serves at the pleasure of the president, is technically accurate but completely non-responsive. It means that only the president can fire him, which is true of all cabinet secretaries. But that is not what was being asked. The question was not, Who has the authority to remove you? The question was, do you hold yourself to the standard of accountability that you publicly claim to champion? And the answer, as the hearing made unmistakably clear, was no. Hegseth does not hold himself to that standard. He deflects to mission success, to the previous administration's failures, to the courage of the troops, anything except looking the congressman in the eye and saying yes. If the Inspector General finds that I shared classified information on an unclassified system, I will be held accountable. He could not say it. He would not say it. And the silence where that answer should have been was deafening to every person watching. The Houthi operation cost question is a part of this hearing that deserves far more attention than it typically receives in coverage of this viral exchange. Hegseth and the administration repeatedly and loudly trumpeted the strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen as an enormous success, proof that the new military leadership was tough, decisive, and effective where the previous administration had been passive and weak. The congressman took that claim seriously enough to ask two follow-up questions that any responsible evaluation of a military operation demands. How much did it cost, and what did it achieve? The cost, by Hegseth's own admission, was several $100 million, potentially close to $1 billion. That is American taxpayer money spent on missiles fired at targets in Yemen. The congressman then asked the most logical and obvious measure of whether the operation achieved its stated goal: how many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since the strikes? The Red Sea closure had been a devastating economic and strategic problem. Houthi attacks were forcing global shipping companies to reroute around Africa, adding weeks and enormous cost to supply chains that affect prices for ordinary Americans. The operation was sold as the solution to that problem. The answer Hegseth gave to how many commercial ships had since used the Red Sea route was zero. Not a few, not a handful. Zero. When Hegseth tried to pivot to military vessel transits, the congressman caught it immediately and repeated the distinction: not military, commercial, because the entire stated justification for the operation was protecting commercial shipping lanes for the global economy. Zero commercial ships had used those lanes. Close to $1 billion had been spent. And this was the success being celebrated. The firing of 8 generals and admirals is the final and in many ways the most structurally alarming layer of this hearing. When the congressman opened by asking Hegseth how many generals and admirals he had fired, Hegseth's first response was that he didn't know the exact number. The Secretary of Defense, the civilian head of the most powerful military on the planet, did not know how many of America's most senior military leaders he had personally removed from command. The congressman supplied the number, 8. This is not a minor administrative footnote. Generals and admirals represent decades of military service, strategic expertise, institutional memory, and command experience that cannot be replaced quickly or cheaply. They carry the trust and confidence of the service members beneath them. They hold relationships with allied commanders that took years to build. Firing 8 of them, for reasons the Secretary of Defense cannot articulate to Congress, sends a signal that reverberates throughout the entire military and to every nation watching, that the highest levels of American military leadership are now subject to political removal without explanation, without transparency, and without accountability. When the congressman asked Hegseth to explain why even one of them was fired, using the Army JAG as a specific example, citing General Kane by name, the answer was identical each time. They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want better representation. That is not an explanation. That is a template. It is the same non-answer dressed in slightly different words, applied indiscriminately to 8 separate decisions that affected the lives and careers of some of America's most decorated military professionals. The congressman's final line, "You can't explain why you fired any of them," was not a dramatic accusation designed for television. It was a quiet, factual observation delivered by someone who had methodically proven every element of his case and no longer needed to argue. The Secretary of Defense had 8 opportunities to explain himself. He used none of them. And that, more than anything else in this hearing, is what the American people needed to see.